What if you were asked to lead a revolution against the most powerful empire in the world without money, without resources, without certainty of victory? Would you accept? Knowing that failure meant not just your death, but the death of an entire dream. This is the story of George Washington, a soldier, a reluctant leader, a man who never asked to be king, but who became the first president of the United States. His story reminds us, true leadership is not about power. It's about placing the future above yourself. He wasn't handed power. He was born in Virginia in 1732, a farmer's son who learned discipline through the soil and responsibility through hardship. As a young man, he joined the Virginia militia. At first, he was ambitious, seeking honor, reputation, respect. But war humbled him. He saw defeat. He tasted failure. He buried comrades. Those early lessons planted a seed that leadership isn't glory, it's sacrifice. When the colonies decided to rebel against Britain, they needed a commander. They chose Washington, not because he was the most brilliant general, not because he was the most eloquent speaker, but because he had something more rare: character. Leading the Continental Army was nearly impossible. His soldiers were hungry, barefoot, freezing. Supplies ran dry. Victory was never guaranteed. At Valley Forge, men died from cold and disease. The army nearly collapsed. And yet, Washington stood with them, sharing their suffering, refusing to abandon them. His presence alone became their hope. After years of war, against all odds, the colonies won independence. The people adored Washington. Many wanted to make him king, but he refused. In a world where leaders clung to power, Washington stepped aside. He returned to his farm, content to live as a citizen. This act shocked the world. British King George III reportedly said, "If Washington does that, he will be the greatest man in the world." And yet, when his country called again, Washington returned. He became the first president of the United States, not as a ruler to be worshipped, but as a servant to the people. Historians and psychologists alike highlight Washington's genius not in intellect, but in restraint. Leadership scholars call this servant leadership, the ability to put others before yourself, to lead not for power, but for purpose. Psychologists note something called the legacy mindset, the ability to think beyond personal gain and instead act for generations to come. Washington embodied this. He was not building a career. He was building a country. If Washington's life were told as a parable, it would sound like this. A man is given a sword to fight for freedom. Against all odds, he wins. The people place a crown in his hands, but instead of wearing it, he lays it down. For he knows crowns fade, but principles endure. And in doing so, he creates something greater than himself, a nation born not of a king's power, but of the people's will. Most of us will never lead a revolution, but all of us are leaders in our own way, families, of teams, of communities. The lesson from Washington's life is simple yet profound. Leadership is not about being the loudest voice or holding the most power. It's about serving something bigger than yourself. In a world that celebrates fame and self-promotion, Washington's humility is radical. He reminds us that true greatness is not measured by what you take, but by what you're willing to give. George Washington showed us that real power, I-S-N-T, in crowns or titles it, S in character. The measure of a leader is not how long they hold on, but how willing they are to let go, so others may rise. So, here's the question for you. In your own life, what kind of leader will you be? Will you lead for recognition? Will you lead for legacy? If Washington's story inspired you, tap LIKE so this lesson spreads. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that leadership begins with character. And don't forget to subscribe for more modern parable stories that remind us that freedom, hope, and greatness begin in the choices we make today. Because sometimes one story can shift how we see leadership forever.